Let's start with an experiment from the 1950s, one that might explain why Republicans and Democrats seem to hate each other today. In the summer of 1954, social psychologist Muzafer Sherif conducted an experiment at Robbers Cave State Park that would quietly reveal something unsettling about human nature. Sherif and his colleagues recruited 22 fifth-grade boys from Oklahoma City and sent them to two adjacent campsites in Robbers Cave State Park. The boys were carefully selected to be nearly identical to each other. None had ever met the others before. They were carefully divided into two equal-sized teams. During the first week, the teams were kept separate. They came to call themselves the Eagles and The Rattlers. The boys on each team grew to know each other and to form, from scratch, a sense of being a group. In the second week, each team learned of the other's existence. Having never laid eyes on the other team, the boys on each side immediately began referring to the others as outsiders, intruders, and those boys. At the other end of the camp, they grew impatient for a challenge. The experimenters arranged a tournament between the Eagles and the Rattlers. When they came into contact for the very first time to play baseball, a member of the Eagles immediately called one of the Rattlers dirty shirt. By the second day of the tournament, both teams were regularly name-calling and using derogatory terms such as pigs, bums, and cheaters, and they began to show reluctance to spend time with members of the other team. Even boys who were compelled to sit out the competitions hurled insults from the sidelines. In the next few days, the relations between the teams quickly degraded. The Eagles burned the Rattlers' flag. The Rattlers raided the Eagles' cabin in the middle of the night. The Eagles raided the Rattlers' cabin in the middle of the day. Boys from both sides began to collect rocks to use in combat. Fist fights broke out, and the staff decided to stop the interaction altogether to avoid possible injury. They were sent back to their separate camps. By the end of the second week, 22 highly similar boys who had met only 2 weeks before had formed two nearly warring tribes, with only the gentle nudge of isolation and competition to encourage them. But the most disturbing part came in week 3. The conflict had affected the boys' abilities to judge objective reality. Each boy was asked to collect beans from the ground. The results were shown to both groups for 5 seconds. Then they were asked to estimate how many beans each child collected. Every boy consistently estimated that members of his own team collected more beans. The numbers shown were identical. The Robbers Cave experiment was one of the first studies to explore why people form groups and why those groups end up clashing. Group identity does something subtle. It bends perception. It magnifies flaws in them. It softens flaws in us. It turns disagreement into threat. Tribalism isn't hatred, it's identity under pressure. We, as modern Americans, probably like to think of ourselves as more sophisticated and tolerant than a group of fifth-grade boys from 1954. In many ways, of course, we are. But the Rattlers and the Eagles have a lot more in common with today's Democrats and Republicans than we would like to believe. At its core, tribalism is intense identification with a group that provides belonging, meaning, and shared purpose. It evolved for survival. Early humans who bonded tightly survived harsh environments, shared language, shared customs, shared defense. That's how civilization became possible. Tribalism built cooperation. It built culture. It built nations. But tribalism has a shadow. It is the biological loophole that many politicians have banked on for a long time, tapping into our fears and tribal instincts. Have you ever noticed how people seem to split into us versus them groups, especially in politics or online spaces? That's toxic tribalism at work. It's a modern twist on something humans have always done, sticking with our group to feel safe and supported. In its original form, tribalism helped us cooperate and survive. But today it often divides us instead. Social media plays a big role in this, creating echo chambers where people only hear ideas they already agree with. Algorithms show content that confirms someone's existing beliefs, which makes their views feel more right and others more wrong. Modern tribalism is not accidental. It is algorithmically amplified. On top of that, where people live, like cities versus rural areas, reinforces these divides. When tribalism gets toxic, it's more than just disagreeing. People start living in completely separate realities. For example, someone might firmly believe climate change is a hoax while someone else sees it as an urgent crisis. These divides create distrust, making it almost impossible to cooperate on important issues. This kind of symbolic division turns almost everything into a political statement. To win, politicians, sometimes with the media's help, do their best to keep people separated, to keep the real or imaginary others just a concept. Because if people spent time with others, talked to them, and ate with them, they would learn that they are the same, human beings with all the same strengths and weaknesses. When people in a country are divided by politics, race, class, religion, or culture, their collective power weakens. Instead of standing together, their influence gets scattered. That makes it easier for leaders to hold onto control and harder for ordinary people to push for the changes they actually agree on. If division becomes constant, leaders don't even need to solve big problems. They just need to keep people arguing with each other. A divided public struggles to unite, and that creates space for powerful interests, shadowy institutions, and wealthy elites to shape decisions without much resistance. The formula is simple. Label the other group, dehumanize them, suggest they threaten resources or safety, turn them into an abstract danger. Once that happens, loyalty overrides objectivity, just like the fifth graders. But here's the part we often miss. Tribalism has been named the culprit behind everything that's wrong with the world today, from political polarization to failure to combat climate change. But tribalism needn't be a dirty word. Tribalism is as necessary to the human condition as breathing. The same instinct that divides can also unite. In the 1990s, Poland underwent rapid economic reform through the Balcerowicz Plan. The transition was painful, unemployment rose, businesses failed. But the country moved with a shared sense of urgency and direction. When a society aligns around a goal, it can move quickly. Shared identity can build, or it can destroy. The instinct is neutral. The direction isn't. Toxic tribalism says us versus them. Healthy tribalism says we're in this together. Tribalism isn't going anywhere. The only question is who uses it and whether it builds positive change or tears it apart. So how do we create a shared sense of purpose when we are deeply divided? Cultural psychologist Michael Morris, a professor at Columbia University, argues in his book Tribal that culture isn't fixed. It's constantly moving. Societies evolve. Younger generations don't just copy their parents. They keep some traditions, drop others, and borrow ideas from completely different cultures. And individuals are changing too. People migrate more than ever. But instead of fully assimilating, many learn to operate in multiple cultural worlds. At home, one mindset. At work, another. Online, maybe something different again. They switch between them depending on the situation. So culture isn't just institutions, and it's not just psychology. It's the interaction between the two. Institutions shape how we think, and how we think slowly reshapes institutions. Culture shapes the mind, and the mind reshapes culture. They're inseparable, which means tribalism isn't stuck in the past, it evolves. And that's important, because if it evolves, it can be redirected. Toxic tribalism isn't inevitable. There are ways to rechannel it. One strategy is focusing on shared values instead of differences. For example, environmental advocates have reached conservative audiences by framing climate protection as stewardship, protecting God's creation, instead of framing it as regulation. Same issue, different language, different reaction. Even wording matters. Calling something a carbon offset instead of a tax changes how people emotionally process it. Connection matters too. When people interact outside of political identity, talking about everyday life, sports, family, work, hostility drops. Mixed ethnic soccer teams in Iraq reduced mistrust simply by playing together for one season. Leadership matters. Companies like Coca-Cola have paired senior managers with younger employees from underrepresented backgrounds to build real relationships across lines of difference. Intel has implemented structured diversity programs that intentionally reshape workplace culture. Even symbols matter. In Catalonia, cultural festivals began incorporating alternative dishes for Muslim communities to reduce cultural friction. These are small interventions, but they all follow the same principle. Shift the identity from us versus them groups to we share something. The instinct to belong doesn't disappear, it just changes direction.